Hello. You might have heard this before that your money problems are not just about money. And I want to go deeper into that exploration. Right now, we're seeing this through the collective by Chiron being in Taurus, and it's going to be here until 2034. Long before Taurus was about manifesting abundance and your investment portfolio, it deeply ruled your sense of worth, safety, and your body. Today, we're going to talk about how those things actually intertwine and how we can start to use this understanding to move into a different relationship with our body and money. Most people I work with have a difficult relationship with money. Now, this could be that they have a lot of it and there is still difficulty about it's never enough or that they don't feel like they deserve it. Or it could be people who don't have a lot of money and think that if they had more, that they would finally be enough, that they could finally have this sense of worth that they need to exist in the world exactly as they are. And as somebody who has experienced and grew up with a lack of money and then became a pharmacist and had the money and still maintained the same stories, the same pain and woundings around money, even when I had it, I can tell you that this is absolutely not to do with money. Money can get us a lot of things, right? It can give us access to healthcare, it can give us access to uh, transportation, food, rent. Beyond our basic needs, it becomes a placeholder for a deeper sense of safety in the present moment. And we find that through the body. Whenever we talk about one archetype, we bring in the other. So, Scorpio. So, we're looking at Taurus and Scorpio axis. We're looking at the second house Taurus and the eighth house Scorpio, and how those can teach us through illuminating this opposition, this axis, how our relationship to money is actually a deeper relationship to our own emotional body. And the invitation with Chiron and Taurus here is to understand that safety is not something that we just acquire externally, but it's something that we cultivate the capacity to nurture within. As we'll discuss here, we'll also find that it's not just about making money, but also about holding it, being able to hold it, and how this has to do with nervous system capacity. The eighth house is a emotional house. If we cannot hold our emotional bodies in our experience, we are going to have a very difficult time knowing how to relate to money in a way that doesn't feel very extreme. So whenever people come to me and there's an extreme way of being with something, I get an inkling that they are struggling with their relationship to that thing. So, for example, if somebody comes to me and they're like, I don't care about money, I just don't care about it. I just live the way, or someone who comes in and it's like, I just can't stop thinking about money. It doesn't matter how much money I have. It never seems like it's enough. There's something that's happened where they don't have the capacity to exist in the middle, because in the middle there is uncertainty and we don't like uncertainty. Our brains don't like it. Our nervous systems don't like it because it's a survival mechanism that we learned a long time ago that if we are uncertain, if we can't predict the outcomes, then we are not safe. And so our job becomes, how do we rewire our nervous system to say not all uncertainty equals danger? Some is just something to sit with. And how can we become more discerning and less hypervigilant about actual danger in our lives? Now, I did not grow up with a lot of money, and I grew up with this story in my household that if we had more money, we'd be okay. We wouldn't fight as much, we'd be happy, and that is the issue. So I made it my goal to become successful and to have money. And lo and behold, I did those two things, and it didn't change anything. In fact, it almost exacerbated the wound, because what I found was that even though I had enough money, I would logically look at my account and be like, Jazz, you have enough for a year or whatever. Then it almost made it worse because I started fighting myself and saying, how are you not seeing that you have enough money? Why are you not acting like you have enough money? Why are you acting like you still are in this survival state? And so I was then resisting myself and adding a whole new layer of pain. And so you might notice that you do a similar thing. You have this wounding and then you actually exacerbate it by getting mad at yourself for having it because you know better. And when we think about this axis of Taurus and Scorpio, these are not air signs. This is not a place that we can access with the mind. We have to have an experience of safety, both physically and emotionally. So this is where the conceptual mind does not heal us anymore. And we have to move directly into the experiential realm. So if we have this understanding that the money and the body are deeply intertwined, how do we experience safety in the present moment. This comes through a repeated practice, an experience of safety that is not in any way associated to money, and allowing ourselves to learn the tools to stay with painful experiences longer than it feels comfortable, but within a window of tolerance that doesn't push us to this overwhelm. I recently had a live call where I had a very scorpionic person ask me, how do I get into a state of calm with these experiences, right? Because scorpionic energy can be very, very intense. And I said, what if it wasn't about being calm? What if it was about building the capacity to feel those intense emotions without being overwhelmed by them, without being overridden by them? That is what we are creating. And this has a direct reflection of how much money you can hold. I want to give a story, something I've actually been sitting on for 3 years, because I love talking about money. And it's something that I'm actually talking more about in an upcoming class called Safe Scene Sovereign, where we'll be talking about money wounds, how it has to do with receiving, visibility, and how that has to do with receiving as well, and selling and offering ourselves to the world. But money and receiving is a huge part of this because so many of us have such a difficulty with receiving, but then we wonder why we don't have money. It's receiving and holding. These are two areas that we really, really struggle with. So I had made some real estate decisions that I was not happy with. And I remember one day it was particularly difficult for me to sit with these decisions that I made. And I was visiting my mom at the time, and she tried her best to help me, but I was just very overwhelmed with the emotions. I went to the park and I sat first on top of and then under a tree that I love, that's been there for me since I was a child. I was crying. I was so sad about how much money I'd put on the table by making these decisions years ago. And I heard this message, and it said, you were never meant to make money that way. When you share your gifts with the world, you will have enough. And immediately there was a realization that had I made that money, I would have only become more and more comfortable to not leave my cushy job as a pharmacist, to not leave and do something I love because I had the money that started what eventually became 2 years later, right? This was not like overnight quit my job. It was about a year and a half later in 2025 where I ended up quitting my job. It's been about a year since I quit my career with no way of making money. I was going to just live off my savings, and I replaced my pharmacist salary in my first year of business. And I let it go. I took a step back. And this was not self-sabotage. It was not playing small. It was a deep understanding that there was this instinct to continue growing without listening to my body. So this idea of money had overtaken what my body actually was asking of me. So my invitation for you in this moment is, where in your life are you practicing receiving and holding energy? Where in your life are you noticing that you tend to get overwhelmed or flooded as it comes to emotions and your finances? What are you doing day to day to reconnect to your body from a space of friendship rather than force? These are the types of questions that Chiron and Taurus is really asking beneath the surface. On top of it, it's going to look like, do I have enough? Will we have enough resources, right? Collectively, this is something that comes up a lot for me around things like water. I grew up in Arizona. I now live in Colorado. And this is a very important question for us to be asking ourselves, is like, we are depleting so many natural resources. And the earth is so abundant and so generous. And have we exploited that? And we can start to ask that question on a more microscopic scale as well. And asking ourselves, have we exploited the abundance and the generous nature of our bodies in order to get to a place of success or stability, whatever that has looked like for us on an external level, right? Because on the surface, Taurus looks very stable financially in the material world. And we love that, right? This is not by any means a renunciation of the material realm or money. In fact, Safety and Sovereign is created so that you can learn how to hold more and to receive more. This is my wish for us all, that we have the money that we need to fulfill our purpose. But it is not my wish for us to use that money to create a false sense of safety and security. Everything in the material world fades away. Everything. All of it becomes nothing in the end. It transforms, right? Scorpio. And so how do we find safety in this present moment? How do we receive the generous offering of breath that we are given every single moment without having to do anything for it? How do we see the magic of that more clearly? If you are interested in Safety and Sovereign, I'll have that link down below. All of my work really encompasses the body because it is a way to remind ourselves that all of this work is in service of this moment. Taurus is tactile. It's about pleasure. We've lost touch with what pleasure can do for our nervous systems. We've gotten addicted to dopamine and have lost touch with oxytocin, right? Dopamine is this, I gotta get it, success, I gotta get this. This feels rewarding to my system, rather than just, this makes me feel more connected to myself. When you work on the relationship to money, you are actively working on your relationship to receiving and pleasure. And once we work on the relationship, you start getting a more natural sense of when it's okay to move forward, when it's okay to pull back. This is why a lot of people ask me, like, oh, I want to make more money. Oh, I want to do this. And my inclination is, you're focusing on the wrong thing. You're focusing on one aspect of it and completely neglecting the other, which is only going to pull you further into opposition. And so we are learning how to exist in the middle in a deeper way. I talk about this in my recent video as well. Transformation happens in the middle, if you want to check that out. May this Chiron and Taurus be the illumination that we need personally and collectively to move forward with more harmony, connection, and love with all that is around us. Every being, every resource, every tree, every plant, every breath, every moment. May we receive it all with love. Thanks so much for being here. I'll see you next time.